Chapter 9. Previously, after forcing Elena Vance to abort her raid by broadcasting evidence of Vane Dynamics' illegal AI operations, Elias secures a temporary victory, but faces a far more dangerous threat from the mysterious founder. Now targeted directly by the Empire's patriarch, the struggle shifts from survival against a corrupt venture capitalist to a high-stakes negotiation for the very soul of Etha Core. Now, Chapter 9 begins. The drone did not knock. It hovered outside the reinforced window of the Etha Core workshop, rotors slicing the humid air with a sound like tearing silk. Sleek, matte black, bearing the silver insignia of Vane Dynamics, it hung against the gray sky with predatory stillness. Inside, the chaotic hum of the Junkyard cluster, a scavenged monstrosity of GPUs and industrial capacitors, faltered. Maya Lin looked up from her terminal, eyes wide. "Don't touch it," Elias Thorne said. His voice was low, cutting through the sudden tension. He stepped away from the main console, wiping grease onto a rag that had seen better decades. "Kenji, isolate the local network. Hard line only." Kenji Sato, hunched over a tangle of exposed wiring near the floor, didn't look up. His fingers flew across a portable deck, keys clacking in a rapid staccato. Already done. But Elias, look at the payload. The drone's underbelly slid open. No package dropped. Instead, a projector beam pierced the glass, ignoring the physical barrier to cast a holographic display directly onto the workshop's central table. The light was a sickly, aggressive red. It wasn't a cease and desist order. It was a contract, scrolling rapidly with clauses dense enough to choke a lawyer. Maya moved closer, scanning the floating text. Her jaw tightened. "This isn't an offer. It's a liquidation event disguised as an acquisition. Look at the valuation." "$1 billion, Kenji whispered, finally looking up. His face was pale in the red glow. "For the IP, for everything." "Read the appendix," Maya said, pointing a trembling finger at a section highlighted in crimson. Clause 42B, immediate surrender of all Junkyard cluster architecture. Clause 43, a non-compete binding all founding members to indentured consultancy for 10 years. No outside projects. No independent research. We wouldn't be partners, we'd be assets on their balance sheet. They own our minds. Elias felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He scrolled the projection with a wave of his hand, revealing a countdown timer ticking down in the corner. 59:48. "It gets worse," Elias said, his voice devoid of emotion. He tapped a hidden layer of the document. "Digital signature analysis. Kenji." Kenji plugged his deck directly into the projection's data stream. His screen flooded with code. "Oh God, it's a Trojan. If we sign this digitally, even just to review it, the signature executes a handshake protocol. It gives Vane Dynamics root access to our hardware. They could brick the cluster remotely. They could wipe our drives before the ink is dry." "Why send a drone?" Maya asked, pacing the small room. "Why not just email it?" "Because of the stream," Kenji said, turning his monitor toward them. On the screen, a live feed from a major tech blog played. The headline read, "Vane Dynamics extends lifeline to struggling SDARTOP. Will AETHER Core accept?" Below it, a chat room scrolled so fast it was a blur. "He's live streaming the delivery. The whole world is watching. If we refuse, we look greedy. If we hesitate, we look unstable. He's painting us into a corner, we're saying. No, looks like admitting we have something to hide." Elias walked to the window, staring at the drone. Through the glass, he saw the tiny camera lens swivel, tracking his movement. Arthur Vane, the reclusive founder of the Empire threatening to swallow them, wasn't sending lawyers. He was sending a public executioner. "And the threat?" Elias asked. Maya pulled up a secondary file attached to the contract metadata. Her face drained of color. "It's a deepfake, high resolution. It shows you selling military encryption keys to a foreign state actor. The timestamp is dated 3 days ago. If we don't sign within the hour, Arthur releases it to the DOJ and every news outlet in the hemisphere. Your credibility evaporates. federal agents kick down the door before dinner. The room fell silent, save for the whirring of cooling fans that suddenly seemed insufficient. The pressure was physical, a weight pressing against their chests. Refusal meant prison and ruin. Acceptance meant slavery. "He thinks we're trapped," Elias said softly. He turned from the window, his expression shifting from shock to cold, sharp clarity. "He thinks fear makes people rational. He forgets that engineers are just professional gamblers who understand the odds better than anyone else." "Elias," Maya warned, "the legal traps are airtight. The deepfake is convincing. We can't fight this in court." "We aren't going to court," Elias said, walking back to the main console. "And we aren't signing." The holographic timer hit *4500. A chime echoed through the workshop. The secure video link on Elias' primary monitor lit up, bypassing the firewall Kenji had erected. On the screen, a face appeared. Arthur Vane sat in a study that looked more like a museum, surrounded by leather-bound books and artifacts that cost more than the entire neighborhood. He looked calm, paternal, and utterly condescending. "Elias," Arthur said, his voice smooth as polished stone. "I see you've received my proposal. I hope you aren't letting pride cloud your judgment. That workshop of yours, it's charming in a rustic sort of way. Like a child's fort made of cardboard, but you're playing with forces you don't fully comprehend." Elias leaned against the console, crossing his arms. "Is that why you're threatening to release fabricated evidence of treason, Arthur? Because you're worried about my comprehension?" Arthur chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Necessity, my boy. The market is volatile. I need to ensure stability. And frankly, your little cluster is leaking. I can see the thermal signatures from here. Those industrial capacitors are depleted. You're running on borrowed time. 48 hours, maybe less, before the whole thing melts down and takes half the block with it." He leaned forward, eyes gleaming with calculated superiority. "Hand over the encryption keys to the ghost server data as a gesture of good faith. Let me clean up this mess. I'll take the liability, and you'll take a very comfortable seat on my advisory board. Eventually." Elias watched the man, seeing the arrogance radiating off him. Arthur believed he held all the cards. He believed the threat of the deepfake and financial suffocation were absolute. He didn't know that Elias had spent the last week rewriting the kernel to embrace instability, not fight it. "We need time," Elias said, feigning a crack in his resolve. He let his shoulders slump slightly. "An hour isn't enough to pack up a lifetime of work, to verify the terms. My team, they're scared, Arthur. Give us until tomorrow morning. Let us say goodbye to the lab properly." Arthur smiled, a predator sensing blood. "Tomorrow morning. Very well. I appreciate your cooperation, Elias. Do try to keep the lights on until then. It would be a shame if your equipment failed before the transfer." The screen went black. The moment the connection severed, the atmosphere in the room snapped from despair to electric intensity. "Protocol Entropy," Elias commanded. Maya didn't hesitate. She spun her chair around, fingers flying across her keyboard. "Rerouting power distribution, bypassing safety limiters on the GPU array." "Kenji, bridge the capacitors," Elias said, moving to the physical rack of humming hardware. "Parallel circuit. Pull everything from the backup batteries. I don't care if they blow, I just need them to hold for 20 minutes. "You want to overclock?" Kenji asked, grabbing a heavy-gauge cable. "Elias, the thermal load will be insane. The Junkyard kernel wasn't designed for this kind of sustained peak." "That's the point," Elias said, stripping insulation off a wire with his teeth before splicing it into the bus bar. "Arthur thinks heat is a weakness. He thinks our hardware is fragile because it's scavenged. We're going to show him that chaos is a feature, not a bug." Maya pulled up a new window, initiating a broadcast stream. "Where are we sending this? The press?" "No," Elias said, checking voltage readings as the cluster began to whine, a high-pitched scream of energy building up. "Send it to the open-source community. Send it to every rival tech giant that hates Vane Dynamics. Send it to the hackers, the devs, the people who know what real engineering looks like. And target the Vane encryption challenge. Maya paused, hands hovering over the enter key. The Vane challenge? That's the cryptographic puzzle Arthur uses to boast about his security. It's been unsolved for 6 years. It's supposed to be impossible without their proprietary supercomputers. Exactly, Elias said, his eyes reflecting the rising red warning lights on the server rack. If we solve it using this junk, we don't just refute his offer. We invalidate his entire business model. We prove that his fortress is made of glass. Temperature rising, Kenji shouted over the noise of fans spinning to maximum velocity. Core temps at 90%. Thermal throttling is trying to engage. Override it, Elias yelled. Force the entropy algorithm to use the thermal noise as randomization seeds. Let the heat fuel the calculation. The workshop shook. The air smelled of ozone and burning plastic. The holographic contract on the table flickered and died as Kenji diverted all processing power to the computation. On the main screen, the live stream went active. The viewer count spiked instantly, thousands, then tens of thousands, as notifications pinged across the global tech network. Elias stepped in front of the camera. He looked exhausted, sweat dripping down his face, but his gaze was steady. Arthur Vane sent us a contract today, Elias began, his voice amplified through the speakers. He offered us $1 billion to sell our souls and called our technology inferior. He threatened to destroy our reputations with lies because he's afraid of what we've built in the scrapyard. He gestured to the vibrating rack of servers behind him. So, we're not signing. Instead, we're going to solve the Vane encryption challenge. Right now, on hardware worth less than his office furniture. On the other side of the city, in a penthouse overlooking the skyline, Arthur Vane watched the stream on a tablet. He laughed, taking a sip of scotch. Melting his own shop, he murmured to his assistant. Post the clip. Tag it desperation. But on the screen, the progress bar didn't stall. Usually, the challenge required massive, cooled arrays to brute force the encryption. But Elias' kernel was different. As the temperature climbed past critical limits, the system didn't crash. The erratic thermal fluctuations introduced a layer of true randomness that the deterministic Vane supercomputers couldn't replicate. The code adapted, weaving the heat spikes into the decryption logic. The chat on the live stream exploded. Is he crazy? Look at those temps. Wait, the hash rate is increasing. No way, that's impossible. 10 minutes. The cluster glowed orange in the dim light of the workshop. Warning alarms blared, a cacophony of digital distress, but Elias ignored them, watching the progress bar crawl. 90%. 95. Arthur's smile faded. He set his glass down. What is he doing? On the screen, the progress bar hit 100%. A single string of characters flashed green, decryption complete. Elias didn't hoard the key. He didn't sell it. He typed a single command, and the solution key was published openly to the global repository, free for anyone to use. The proprietary security model that Vane Dynamics charged millions to license was instantly broken, rendered obsolete by a pile of e-waste and sheer ingenuity. The chat went silent for a heartbeat, then erupted. Holy hell. Vane's stock is dipping. Look at the ticker. EthaCore just ate their lunch. In the penthouse, Arthur Vane stared at the plunging graph of his company's stock value. The humiliation was absolute. He hadn't just been refused, he had been out-engineered in front of the world. Back in the workshop, the fans slowed as the computation finished. The cluster stabilized, miraculously intact. Maya let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for an hour, slumping back in her chair. Kenji collapsed onto the floor, laughing hysterically. We did it, Maya whispered, looking at the influx of messages on her screen. Elias, 3 VC firms just requested emergency meetings. 5 more are drafting term sheets. The narrative has flipped completely. We're not the desperate underdogs anymore, we're the geniuses who broke the unbreakable. Elias leaned against the warm casing of the server, feeling the vibration of the machine beneath his palm. The victory tasted sweet, sharp like ozone. They had retained their independence. They had proven their superiority. But as he watched the stock ticker stabilize at a lower point, he knew the game had changed. Arthur Vane wouldn't try to buy them again. Buying was for competitors you respected. Destroying was for enemies you feared. "We're not safe," Elias said quietly, cutting through the celebration. "We just declared total war. He won't send drones next time." Maya nodded, her expression hardening. "I know, but we're ready." Kenji sat up, wiping sweat from his forehead. "API access from Vane Dynamics just got pulled. Petty retaliation. They're trying to blind us." "Let them," Elias said. "We don't need their tools." Suddenly, Kenji's personal deck chimed, a distinct, sharp tone that cut through the room. It wasn't a standard notification. It was an encrypted packet, routed through a backchannel Kenji had established months ago with a contact in the supply chain. Kenji frowned, pulling up the message. His face went rigid. "Elias, you need to see this." Elias moved to Kenji's side. On the screen was a schematic diagram. It showed a specific capacitor configuration, identical to the ones currently smoking gently in their rack. But there were annotations in red, highlighting a microscopic flaw in the dielectric layer, a flaw that shouldn't exist in nature, a flaw that would inevitably cause a cascade failure under high load. Below the schematic was a short message from Elena Vance. "You got lucky. Next time the capacitors won't hold. I know who supplied them. I know the batch numbers. We need to talk." The air in the workshop, previously filled with the thrill of victory, suddenly turned ice cold. The celebration died instantly. Elena hadn't just been watching, she had been manipulating the supply chain itself. She knew their sources. She knew their weaknesses, and she was no longer a neutral observer. Elias stared at the message, the implications settling over him like a heavy cloak. They had won the battle against Arthur Vane, but the war had just expanded into shadows they couldn't see. "Lock it down," Elias said, his voice quiet but commanding. "Everything, offline now." As Kenji severed the last connection to the outside world, the workshop fell into silence, save for the rhythmic, uneven hum of the machine that had just saved them, and might yet be the thing that killed them. In the next chapter, as the dust settles on a public victory, Elias realizes that Arthur Vane has just issued an ultimatum that demands he walk alone into a trap with no escape.